James's trick temper. Spring had come to the island of Sodor, and all the engines were very excited. And one day the Fat Controller arrived, and today was the day when Emily would return from the works. Then a familiar whistle sounded out. Emily had returned. She had a new number 12 on her tender, and besides from looking the same, she really was the NWR's number 12. Emily was happy to be back. And today James had to pull a goods train, but he wasn't happy. He was very cross because on his first day of work, his wooden brakes had failed when he was black, and he had crashed into a field, but it was best not to argue. And so James turned around and puffed away, throwing out his teeth. James was bigger than Edward, but smaller than Gordon. Later, James arrived at the shunting yard, and he was waiting impatiently for Rosie to arrive with his trucks. Just then, an ear-piercing whistle sounded out. Rosie had arrived. Rosie just had to help Bill and Ben out of a fire, and so she puffed off, laughing. James puffed onto the line the trucks were on, and he bumped them. One of the trucks, an old brown one that looked like a steam engine's tender, spoke up. They knew how to pay James out for bumping them, and so he puffed away to Vickerstown. All right, make up your... As James got to Gordon's Hill, the tender truck whispered. And then they started pushing James down the hill. James's driver and fireman tried to stop him, but he was going too fast, and more trouble lay ahead. Up ahead on the line, Rosie was supposed to be taking a goods train to Great Waterton. But the signal was jammed because a van had destroyed it, and the station master telephoned the police. No one knew about the runaway James. Just then, James's whistle blew from behind Rosie. He shut his eyes, applied his brakes, but it was too late. Luckily, no one was hurt. James was on his side at impact, and his boiler was dented. Rosie had also derailed, but was otherwise fine. Sorry. A few weeks later, Edward and Emily were at the sheds, chatting about what happened. Just then, a familiar whistle sounded. It was James. James had returned with his overhaul. He looked pretty much the same, but with a few differences. And he was very sad. He turned around and went into a shed, feeling very bad about his accident a few weeks ago. Edward told the story to James to never bump trucks again. When Edward first arrived on Sodor in 1915, he had acquaintance, which used to work on the Sodor Midland Railway in 1897. He was Furnace Railway K2, just like Edward, but with gray paint, black stripes, and the number 15 on his tender, and his name was Tiger. Edward and Tiger were brothers, and they were the only two tender engines which ran on the North Western Railway when it first opened. But they only did one job each. Edward pulled coaches, while Tiger pulled goods trains. Edward was only an engine, but he was still very wise and kind. He was kind with his coaches. Like some other engines, Tiger was rough with his trucks. Edward warned Tiger to be careful, but he took no notice. One day during World War I, the manager came to see them. There was a gunpowder train that needed to be taken to the British Army for tanks. Tiger had to take it because he was a goods engine. When the manager left, Edward warned his brother that Tiger when the manager left, Tiger warned his brother that gunpowder and dynamite are both very explosive and could wipe out an engine if they weren't careful. But as you might have guessed, Tiger refused to listen and left the sheds. Edward decided to take a nap as passenger trains were canceled due to the war. So he closed his eyes. Then he heard an explosion, and he puffed away to where the explosion came from. He couldn't bear to think of what happened. And when he reached the source of the blast, he was in shock. Pieces of wood, metal, ashes, and fire were spread out, and a battered and burned number 15 laid in front of Edward's wheels. He sighed sadly. Tiger refused to listen. Later, the fact director, aka Sir Topham Hatt I, came to see him and told the new engine would arrive to help out. But he wasn't sure when he or she would arrive. It was not until... But at least the engine came in 1922. He was a big green engine who was a cross between a GNR Ivet Class C1 and an LNR Gresley Class A1A3. Henry. Thomas also knows about Tiger, but he even needs to keep it a secret. James knew never to bump trucks again, even though that he doesn't like shunting or trucks. And then one day, James went to the quarry to work with Mavis. Alright, make your video. James had saved the quarry, and later, James was returning from work. James the Red Engine still doesn't like shunting or trucks. But thanks to Edward's story of Tiger, he knows never to bump trucks again. But he may be wondering, who helps out while James was getting his rebuild? Well, I guess that's another story, and he reminds me of a British Railway Class 42 fitted with a claw. The end.